This episode is sponsored by Transcend, a veteran-owned and operated performance optimization company that I introduced recently as a sponsor on this show. Well, since then, I have actually been using my products and I've had incredible success. There was initial blood work that was extremely detailed, and based on that, they offered supplementation. So I began taking DHEA, BPC 157 for inflammation, based on the fact that I've been a stuntman, a martial artist, and a firefighter my whole life. Lots of aches and pains. Dihexa to help cognition after multiple punches to the head and shift work, and peptides. 4 months later, they did a detailed blood work again, and I was actually able to taper off 2 of the peptides because my body had responded so well to just one of them that it was optimized at that point. So I cannot speak highly enough of the immense range of supplementation that they offer, whether it's male health, female health, peptides to boost your own testosterone, which I would argue is needed by a lot of the fire service, or whether it's exogenous testosterone needed, especially after TBIs or advanced age. Now, as I mentioned before, the other side of this company is an altruistic arm called the Transcend Foundation, which is putting veterans and first responders through some of their protocols free of charge. Now, Transcend are also offering you, the audience, 10% off their protocols. And you can find that on jamesgearing.com under the Products tab. And if you want to hear more about Transcend and their story, listen to episode 808 with the founder, Ernie Colling. Or go to transcendcompany.com. Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. As always, my name's James Gearing, and this week it is my absolute honor to welcome back onto the show former law enforcement veteran, SWAT team member, and gang unit member, Marc Coull. Now, if you missed my first conversation with Marc, it was episode 630, and that was when he was still working for his department. Marc has since retired this year, and if you thought his last conversation was raw, then prepare yourself, because someone who's able to take the uniform off and truly advocate for their profession is an extremely needed and important voice. So we discuss a host of topics, from the recruitment crisis in the first responder community, the importance of strength and conditioning and combatives in law enforcement, the deployment of the National Guard, what we're seeing with ICE, his perspective on Gaza, the importance of moral courage, cowardice in leadership, and so much more. Now, before we get to this incredible conversation, as I say every week, please just take a moment. Go to whichever app you listen to this on, subscribe to the show, leave feedback, and leave a rating. Every single 5-star rating truly does elevate this podcast, therefore making it easier for others to find. And this is a free library of well over 1,100 episodes now. So all I ask in return is that you help share these incredible men and women's stories so I can get them to every single person on planet Earth who needs to hear them. So with that being said, I welcome back onto the show Marc Coull. Enjoy. Well, Marc, I want to start by saying, firstly, welcome back onto the show. It's funny, if we Google your name in the Behind the Shield, it doesn't come up because last time you were still working, so it was under tactical. So I want to welcome you back with your own name this time onto the Behind the Shield podcast.
Thank you. Yeah, I can use my name now. All done.
So for people listening, let's just kind of do a recap of the roles that you played in law enforcement the last your full career, and then I'd love to kind of transition to your transition. I just used that word twice in a sentence.
I did 25 years. I started out in uniform patrol. I did uniform patrol for 13 years. But I found myself really attached to community policing, so that was kind of where I went. I am like, I used to fight against it. and I don't anymore. I was unusual in law enforcement because I started off believing in empathy, compassion, and love with a physical skill set to back those things up. And what I found was that that in and of itself helped me. I never hated the job. I never hated society. I didn't blame anyone for how they looked at police. Part of that was my upbringing, which we went over in the last podcast. But it never made me hate the people I was supposed to protect. It never made me hate victims. It never made me hate any criminals. My personal view on it was I've never fought evil. I fight human beings who commit evil deeds. So I didn't look at anyone as inherently bad or inherently good. I took it for what it was. So I never really wanted to leave uniform patrol, where a lot of people, the goal in law enforcement is to get out of there and get to a specialty unit as quick as you can. And I struggled a lot because of how I was. I would get a lot of numbers in a neighborhood to begin with, numbers meaning arrests, and then it would kind of quell, which in my career and in law enforcement, that's supposedly the goal, that you get these arrests and then you can put a neighborhood that was in distress into maintenance phase, so the arrests lower. So I always thought that was the goal, and turns out that's not always the goal. They want the numbers, they want the stats. What wound up happening was, in that 13 years, I really became good at gathering what I called my little army. So I would always find the good because they'll point out the bad. Always find the good. There's far more good than bad in any neighborhood. And what I started to find was a lot of the neighborhoods that I was in were ganged up, and that was predominantly where the problem was. So then I started going after gangs, arresting gang members, and then I wanted to go to the gang unit. We had stood one up, and we had a really violent period in about 2011, which is also when I went on the SWAT team. But there was like 7 murders between 3 cities. And they put me on a task force with the gang unit, and I loved it. And we wound up making a lot of arrests, taking a lot of guns. So my name kind of got put out there. However, one of the best compliments I ever received was they didn't want to put me on the gang unit because I was an informal leader who did not always support the goals and standards of the police department, which I take that as a badge of honor. So
I can
I had
relate.
to apply. Yeah, I had to apply for the gang unit 3 times. And that in and of itself is very rare because people like get butthurt and then they go to another unit, or like I said, they just want to get out of uniform patrol. All I wanted was the gang unit. I never minded uniform patrol. And within that span, I also became we were on a dedicated bike unit for a year, and I loved being on bike. A lot of officers like crap on the bikes and community policing, and those are like the Punisher skull type people, and I was never that. But being on the bike unit, that bike unit was 4 of us. We controlled a beat that was very dangerous at the time. There was an apartment complex that was constantly shot up with, they had AK-47s. It was connected to New York. It was 9 Trey. So we wound up decreasing violent crime in that area by 85%, by their own metrics, which they were very angry. They were happy. And the guy that was in charge of the unit actually used it to become a major in the department. And as soon as he left, the bike unit got canked. And then yep. Then shortly thereafter, I got put on that task force, and then I eventually went to the gang unit in 2014, and that's where I stayed for until my career ended in January of 2025. And within the gang unit, then I always had you. You are big on mentorship, I know that, and nobody ever does it alone. And I couldn't have done what I did without the few uppers that understood what I was and what I brought to the table, and then the few uppers that wanted to use me for what I could give them, and whatever, that is what it is. So when I went to the gang unit, then all of a sudden they wanted me to start recruiting. They wanted me to work with intel. I did a couple of long-term, like large investigations involving gangs and partnering with the feds, which I got kicked out of the FBI building. So that we can go over that later.
Yeah,
But
and we should.
yeah. Um, So within that scope of things, then I started training at the academy, and then I was a combatives instructor. I really loved that. I totally revamped the program, rebrought Jiujitsu in. I partnered with surrounding gyms. We got Adopt a Cop started with Mitch. So that was training officers, because that's really the problem in law enforcement is we are not very good in the physical realm, and we're big on slogans and not so big on actions. And then the last 3 years I was almost exclusively doing recruiting. I was going to military bases because during the defund movement and all that, the uppers decided they didn't want to be militarized, and we shouldn't be looking for vet. It was the most ridiculous thing ever. And so recruiting started slipping, and then they sent me to military bases, and our recruiting kept coming back up. And then I started a prep class for aspiring officers, and prior to that, they were getting to 15 to 20 recruits in a recruit class. When I took over the program, it was back up to 30, 40, 50 viable candidates for our recruiting, and we were able to bolster our numbers. And then as soon as I left, they dismantled all of that. So now they lowered the standards, unfortunately, because I was big on, if I'm going to do this, they're going to complete the physical tasks to get into the academy. I need to watch them, right? I want to see, can they get over a wall? And we had a major, I crap you not, we had a scientifically viable test. You couldn't get sued or anything like that. So one of the last things I did was implement, because I was a TSAC guy and NSCA, implement that test. It was 5. It was, I wanted a shuttle run, but they left a mile and a half. But it was 5 events that you had to complete. Well, we were getting enough. You just had to run the test like every weekend. Well, officers being officers, they started complaining, well, can't we just do it once a month? I was like, no. I was like, we got to get as many people as we can. And I said, then I want to get them into the prep class. I want them to assimilate to our style. So by the time they set foot on that grinder, they're ready to rock. I say, they need to believe in this. They need to believe in us. So they start complaining and they go up above me, which happened throughout my career. And a major comes and he comes with these standards. I crap you not. As a male, you had to complete 11 push-ups, and as a female, you had to complete 4 push-ups. You didn't have to go over the wall. I think the 300-meter sprint was like at a minute in 15 seconds. And I looked at him, I was like, "What? Where did you get these numbers?" I said, how did you do this? Oh, well, I just figured like those were better numbers than what we had. I said, the numbers we had actually came from a test from LawFit and all these people. I said, they're defendable in court. I said, so we've already gone through the expense of the city attorney saying, yeah, well, we can defend these numbers. You're just pulling numbers out of your ass. And he's like, yeah, but I think we'll get more people. And I said, but you won't get the people we want. And then the people that like can physically complete, you're going to anger them because they're going to be like, this dude just did 11 push-ups. I did 50 push-ups. Why is he here? And he just didn't get it. And I begged him. I was like, listen, you send me to all these schools. You made me a subject matter expert in this. And you just come with, I don't know, you went to a restaurant and did this with the other uppers on a napkin. And here we are. And he instituted those numbers. And I think the next academy class, they lost like 15 people within 2 weeks. So that's what I did for the last 3 years. And I saw the writing on the wall. I hit the age, I hit 50. I have some kind of severe injuries. I'm scheduled. You can kind of hear the lisp right now. I got stupid braces in. They have to fix my airway. And I'm having neck surgery December 8th. because I wound up hurting my neck real bad, and it went undiagnosed for 15 years. That's another story with workers' comp. But anyway, I hit all my numbers, and I left. I retired, and I do not regret it. I highly recommend retirement, but I also, everybody always asks like, "Oh, I would never join." I would join law enforcement tomorrow. I would tell my sons, if that's what now they can't go to the department I've left from, but I would tell my sons, yeah, if it's something you want to do it. I don't regret a day of it. Even when I talk about when I hurt my neck, it was, a guy jumped out a window on a warrant. He was trying to commit suicide, and he basically like fought me to try and drop from a second story window. And I was able to thankfully pull him back. And that became a whole thing. I was fighting like gang members. I tore everything in my shoulder. I wound up breaking my neck and not knowing it. But everybody always asked me like, well, you should have dropped him. And I just think that's disgusting. And I always, when I had the opportunity to teach academy classes, I would tell that story, and I would ask them, I was like, what do you think I regret about that day? And all of them would be like, oh, not dropping him, or you shouldn't have caught him. And then I just look them dead, and then I tell them the injury that I suffered with, and then I tell them I regret nothing, not a moment of it. And full circle wise, that individual, because it could have wound up in an IA complaint, because his I think I told you the story the last time. His mom asked him if I threw him out the window, and like he looked at me like a kid looks at you when they're about to lie, and he goes, you know how they do, and he put his head down, and like everybody's attacking me, and the mom's like, you threw my child out a window. I wound up going to the hospital with him, holding his hand while they were stitching him up. I wound up following him. Like he hit me up a couple times. He wound up getting shot again. But full circle wise, I named my son after him, and I didn't know it at the time because I knew his street name, and I named. Now I have a younger son. I just had a son 3 months ago because why not? But my 11-year-old is named after him, and the way I found that out was he had called me. And it was the anniversary when it happened. And everybody was telling the story. And I looked up the report because everybody was like, did that really happen? Like, that's one of your stories? And I was like, yeah, it really happened. So I looked up the report and I looked at his name and I was like, holy crap. And I had named my son after him. So and those are the stories that 9-to-5 job in an office, you ain't getting that. So I don't regret anything. I loved it, every moment of it. So.
Well, I want to get to the recruitment in a minute because obviously that's something that I'm passionate about as well. But before we do, excuse me, you'd alluded to the importance of the heart for service. This kindness, compassion, empathy that I would argue the best firefighters, cops, paramedics, doctors, nurses, teachers have. But there's this paradox, especially in your profession where you truly are having to fight for your life. Sometimes ours is more usually inanimate objects trying to kill us. But I've really realized this. If you truly want to be kind in the world, you have to have the physicality to back it up. Otherwise, as we recorded, we're talking before we hit record, there are very prominent bullies at the moment. Without that physicality, they just get to walk all over people. But if you get a bully who's a little bitch, then now you get to enforce your kindness because it can't be driven away by fear. So talk to me about the importance of the physicality in uniform to then bolster the kindness, compassion, empathy that we should be known for.
Because so the way I taught my academy students was fear is a gift. Like you have to have fear. Scared is the curse that comes with it. Fear is something that tells you, okay, this can go sideways. I have to be ready for this. I have to look for this. Scared is you freeze. You overdo something or you underdo something. So that's how I differentiated. You have to have fear, like the stupid no fear stickers and all that stuff, or that's ridiculous. That's just sloganism that doesn't do anybody any good. And I used to hear you know, and luckily in the military, I was well trained, and I saw it. So and as a child, I told you I had, like, I had a violent household. So there is a there is a stark difference between knowing violence and understanding violence. You know violence can work. You know when you see it. You know when you're scared of it. To understand it is to know, if I'm to use it, I know my parameters. I know my left and right guardrails as a police officer. It is a short-term solution to de-escalate a situation. And de-escalations become this buzzword, and weak officers think it means I'm just going to keep talking for forever and hopefully it goes right. Officers that understand what de-escalation is not a tactic, it's an outcome. So if someone gets in my face and I check them hard and then I take them to the ground, that's de-escalation, because that person was getting aggressive and now I've done it under control. To have the empathy, compassion, and love is to know when that is not necessary, is to have the physical confidence when you arrive on scene. I can handle what's going to come at me. And I see it all the time with officers. You're seeing it right now with ICE. Why are you masked up 8 deep, yanking a mom to the ground, not being able to control her? 3 officers are now on top of her. You're useless. And you're making the problem worse, because now you're getting filmed. Now people are yelling at you. You saw the ICE officer who lost his gun and then picked up his gun and pointed it at the crowd as if he was some tough guy, and he's yelling at them to get back. You messed up. The crowd didn't do anything. You goofed. And that's where having the empathy, compassion, and love and a physical skill set to back those things up is essential to a law enforcement officer. And I always get asked, what do you think makes a good cop? Should it be totally physical? Blah, blah. Self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Know when you're getting hyped up. They didn't sign up to be better. Anyone in the crowd did not sign up to be better, did not sign up to be the bigger person in that crowd. The law enforcement did. We have the bully in charge. Oh, they're in their faces and they're, yeah, yep. Mm-hmm. That's what they do. That's what crowds do. And I have been in situations where officers have froze because there's a crowd gathering. And this is against tactics. I would always go and talk. And guess what? The crowd dispersed. On my Instagram page, which I no longer post, but I keep my stories because I promised my little army. We marched down as a SWAT team, and we had and we literally look like an occupying force. We're geared up. We've got 40 mics. We've got every implement under the sun. There was a man who brandished, he had broken into a church. He brandished a firearm at the pastor who was opening up the church and threatened to kill anybody that came to get him out. We're marching down the street, and here comes the crowd, because this is right in the midst of the defund the police and George Floyd. And they're yelling at us, see, this is what you do. This is what you do. We're going to come get you. You ain't getting him, blah, blah, blah. We know how you do. You're going to kill him. You're going to kill him. And I could literally see the SWAT guys, the shoulders start going up, like in their tents. And I see one guy filming, and he's like, F the police and all this stuff. And I recognized him. So he's filming, and you can see in the video, I break off from, our line, and I look at him and I say, hey man, you filming? He goes, yeah, I'm filming. I said, make me look taller. And he's like, what? And I said, make me look taller. And and out of nowhere, he goes, cool. Is that you? And I was like, yeah, it's me. And all of a sudden, the entire tenor of what was going on changed. And our intel guys were watching because they had put us on Facebook Live, and everybody was like, F them, don't let them get to the church. They're taking over our neighborhood. And then all of a sudden my buddy was telling me, he's like, hey man, everything changed after that, because they were like, who the f is that guy? And the guy on the video says, oh man, that's cool. He's a gang unit. I got mad respect for him. He do everything right. He goes, that dude big as hell out of that uniform. And then they started calling me Debo. And then all of a sudden, everybody kind of, even the SWAT guys were like, relaxed. And now we're about the business of what we have to do for the offender, not for the crowd that has every right under the Constitution to call us every name in the book, to film us, to do whatever they want. I don't go contempt of cop. And that comes from my empathy, my love and compassion, because I understand this neighborhood has probably been inundated with police their entire lives, with people that look like me, wore my badge, and probably did not treat them right all the time. And this is a known gang member that I'm talking to, but he's also a citizen of the city that I'm sworn to protect. And within that incident, several times they started pushing on the police tape, like when we had come back. And their plan, the command bus's plan, which I can't stand the ICS system because they're like 3 miles away telling us what we should do about this crowd because, hey, the crowd's moving on the crime scene tape. They were going to OC spray him. That was going to be their plan, to walk officers down and OC spray him. I told the scene commander, I said, hey, give me one shot at this. And he's like, I ain't sending nobody with you. And I was like, all right. Right. Again, not tactics. This is not something I teach. Right. But 30 seconds of calculated crazy, sometimes it works out. Right. So I walk down and I tell everybody, and this is on the same video that's on my Instagram page. I said, hey, our problem is right there. If he comes out and does something, I want us to get hit, not you. Can you please, I don't mind if you film, can you please back away from the caution tape? All right. And they all back up. And in that video, you hear a dad, because the kid's saying, what is he doing? And the dad says, he's going to take a bullet for us. And that, you can't get any better than that. I don't want awards. And I've been officer of the year and like all the stuff's in the attic, right? None of that means shit. Like it doesn't, like, you can give anybody that stuff. And like everybody on scene there probably got an award like 2 days later. None of that matters to me. What that dad said to his child is the highest compliment a police officer can get. Because through my empathy, through my compassion, through my love, through looking at humans as humans and telling them, please. Now, I also knew if it went sideways, I was going to grab the gang member with that phone, take him to the ground as quick as possible, absolutely dominate him in the physical realm. And guess what? The 25 other people, they're generally going to back up because they don't want any of that. Because it was quick, it was efficient, and it wasn't done yelling. Because I've also done that. I've also had crowds where there's 2 or 3 agitators. One of them gets in my face, which that's what I wanted. Do a quick ankle pick or a takedown, dominate them, get in the mount, tell them to calm down. And now all of a sudden, all the bullies back up. They're like, oh, because there's still enough respect for police. They know there's more of me coming. And they also know that was not what they expected to happen. And that's where law enforcement loses it, because within that empathy, compassion, and love component, you don't hate. You don't blame society for the ills. You look inward. What can we do better? You know what? I'm getting a little bit of a pooch here. I got to fix this. I went to my physical and they're telling me my cholesterol's too high. I'm getting diabetic. Like, you fix inward instead of looking outward to blame your problems on, especially as law enforcement, because like it or not, you signed up to be better. And that's where I came up with the warrior police. And that's like, nobody liked that. Well, the academy classes love it, but the uppers didn't like that because that has a bad connotation. And I always used to tell them, I was like, I define what a warrior is. And I said, a true warrior, the ones who did it best, knew that their job was to go extinct, was to not be necessary, was to go back to their farms. Me and Jeff talk about it all the time, about earn your garden. That's what a warrior does. He earns his peace. And I'm there to protect, not to make more of me, but to make more of people who have better solutions than me. I'm a dinosaur. If I have to continually use violence to try and keep everything under control, I am failing in some aspect of what's going on. And that's what drives me crazy about what's going on now, is these bullies. You know, you're you're commandeering what was supposed to be a noble profession. And we've already taken enough hits, and you're just making it worse. So yeah, I'm huge on that. And it cost me a lot because I differentiate between cops and warrior police. Cops can't stand that crap. I was invited to a symposium, and it's like 500 police officers, and I was invited because they were specifically talking about how I targeted gangs, how it only takes one officer to turn around a neighborhood. And I look the way I look. Obviously I got the Viking thing going on. I sit down, and it was an FBI symposium. He introduces me, and I'm looking at tight t-shirts and huge dudes, and they're just waiting for me to, like, you go in, you kick ass, you tell everybody it's your neighborhood now. And I literally start off by saying I believe in empathy, compassion, and love, and treating everyone like a human being, and finding what we have in common. And you you could have heard a pin drop, and like they were like, you know how a dog looks at you like they're just like, what, huh? And the female sitting next to me, she knew who I was, and she texted me, and my phone goes off, and she's like, you just effed up their world. And that was true. And what drives me crazy, James, I got done. It was like a 30-minute presentation, and I kept hitting on empathy, compassion, and love. It'll make you better at your job. It won't get you jaundiced. You won't. I say, I'm not saying you don't ever put hands on somebody. What I'm saying is when you do it, be physically in control of yourself and that person, which means you got to train. And our departments are not doing this for us because they're so far removed. And back in their day, it was 6-on-1 and everything worked out. And I said, but they didn't have body cameras. They didn't have people ready to film, ready to critique you. And I said, so we have to be better. So I go, and everybody kind of like slow claps it. And then I'm out in the corridor, and there had to be about 15 officers in tight shirts, Punisher skulls, all that stuff coming up to me and saying, I want to be more like that. I didn't think we could operate like that. I want to operate like that. I've never, and I I'm always reticent because it's so self-aggrandizing, but here we are. I knew. I knew that they looked at me, and they were impressed. They just didn't know how to get there. And that made me sad because a lot of them, I said, why didn't you raise your hand when I said it? Because I asked if anybody had any questions, and like, nobody. And then I get mobbed in the corridor, and they were like, man, I wasn't gonna say that was the right way. And that's what I love about the younger generation coming up. They have that in all the measurables. They are more empathetic, more compassionate, and more loving as individuals. They're confused by what they see of the world and of our leaders, because we told these kids, care about others, take care of your neighbors. And then as soon as they do it, we call them soft, we call them names, and that's not the way the world works. When I got that prep class, their eyes, like, it just clicked. What they meant, what they're missing is the sacrifice, the drive, and determination to be in professions like ours. They don't understand it is going to take a toll. And the physical realm, and being empathetic, compassionate, and love is going to stave off a lot of the things that takes people out in the profession. The drug abuse, the alcohol abuse, the self-loathing, the coming to work and being mad at the world and taking it out on the first suspect you can. If you keep that mindset of continual evolution and continual bettering yourself, it it it's a bulwark against that, and it's how it's supposed to be. Because the guys that I always loved being around were of the similar mindset, and we all didn't have exactly the same mindset, but we all wanted to get the job done the most correct way possible with the least amount of damage to anyone, anything, and us as well. And I've been very fortunate that that's how I rolled for 25 years. But it sucked on the way out to know that it was just going to be like, He's gone. That's it. Like they tore apart the gang unit. It just became a jump out squad. It messed me up pretty bad to watch that. They don't even go to the schools anymore.
See, this is what's so counterintuitive is there's this completely backward mentality that if you lower standards, as you alluded to earlier, we'll have all these people and then we'll be able to, hire a bunch of people. And when I look at my career, I argue, I've worked in one of the best fire departments in America, hands down, and one of the worst. And the worst one, they had better pay, they had more time off with the Kelly Day, and zero fitness standards, zero need to prove your worth as a firefighter in any way, shape, or form during the orientation when I got hired. And they could barely get anyone to test. The one that held the bar super high, even despite this recruitment crisis we're going through now, they're still, still held at the top because their standards, at least when I was there, they took, I figured this out the other day, they took the top 3% of the list of over 1,000 candidates at the written. So the list was even bigger before that. And then through the probationary year of each of the two classes, they used to get rid of about a quarter of the class. So by the end of probation, you're down really to each class was 1% of that list. And so you've basically removed anyone that was there for the wrong reason. You held such a high standard that only if you have compassion and service burning in your heart are you going to make it through that crucible. And there was a culture of fitness. They were professional on the fire side, professional on the EMS side. They were phenomenal firefighters. And then conversely, in the worst one, there are people now that if, God forbid, we have an event in the theme park, the world famous theme park they protect, there are people that won't put the mask on. There are people that won't go into the building, won't go towards, the people that are wounded after a shooting, whatever it is. Yep. They will turn and run. And if your family are in that incident, which of those departments do you want? Ironically, the city of Anaheim protects Disneyland. Same company, different dynamic. So this is why I think it's so important to have these standards at the highest level. And one of your fellow law enforcement officers from different department got into the background check world. And we were talking, and he was saying that it costs on average $500,000 to get rid of a single bad recruit. One. So with this whole, we don't have the money, like in the fire service to fund a fourth shift, or in law enforcement to just simply give the training that's needed and show the support, it's a complete false economy too. But when you talk about the level of training that allows you to be compassionate and empathetic in law enforcement uniform, as these standards start to diminish, there's a greater and greater and greater chance that bad things are going to happen by law enforcement officers because they don't have the physical fitness, the defensive tactics, or the moral compass to do what's right.
Yep. Yeah, and that's it. When I did the prep class, I was solid in the prep class for about 2 years. And my wife, who's still in law enforcement, she compiled, because they were looking at it, hey, should we continue this? Because they were saying this is too expensive. He gets paid OT because I was coming in on Saturday mornings to train these guys and girls. So they were like, it's too expensive. And basically what it was, because of how I talked and because they didn't want me, unduly influencing academy recruits, which I was like, whatever. And that's going back to like my career. The funniest thing I ever got, I got told many things about myself, like post when I got transferred. And when I finally got transferred to the gang unit, there was a guy who became major, and he goes, "You know why you got transferred to the gang unit, right?" And I was like, "No, not really." And they were like, "Well, we wanted to put you in a place that you only had like 3 other people to influence, because no matter where we sent you, we were guaranteed to get 3 more of you out of a squad, and we just can't deal with that." So that, like, when I started the prep class, they wanted to kill it like right away. They were like, "Hey, it's him, and he's getting," because my numbers were good. I was getting 20 people 2 times a week to train. And my wife actually compiled the statistics on the people that I trained that eventually went to the academy. They were like at a 96% graduation rate. So then she brought it to the uppers, and I had our deputy chief he had been a mentor of mine forever, and I owe him a lot. And he was like, "Yeah, no, we ain't moving them. The OT's worth it. Like this is what we want." And what you found was, especially these younger kids, their T-shirt phrases and slogans and like "burn the ships" and all this bullshit. Like I was like, no one's coming to save you, and I do CrossFit, and right, like I was like, that's awesome. Like, what does that mean to you that no one's coming to save you? Well, I got to do everything on my own. I said, well, you're in the wrong profession then. And they would be
100%.
like, well, they'd be like, what? I was like, if you call on the radio and you say you need me, about 20 of us are coming to save you. Like that's the gig. If a woman is being beat by her husband, we're sending like 3 units. Like everybody's coming to save you. Like that stuff is just a slogan, and it's meant for you to buy T-shirts. It doesn't mean anything. And so they were kind of like, yeah, and they love that. Like every human loves that, to be part of something bigger and to know that there is a standard. And I told my chief, I am sick and tired of you guys saying we're number one and then not leaning into it. Or worse, well, what's this other department doing? Who cares? Be the first. And then go to all your symposiums in Las Vegas at $10,000 a pop and tell them you're the first. Like, that's what people want. They want to know, can I pass this crucible? And can I be among the elite? Because, yeah, they may pass at lower standards, but guess what? A guy like me, when they see me operate, they're going to know they passed at lower standards. And all you're going to get is a liar who tells himself, oh, I'm just like this other guy, or someone who just gets down on themselves because they're like, I don't measure up. So it's better to keep those higher standards and have it assimilate, and then that's just is your culture. Like I'm tired of this. How do we build a culture? From prep class to the background process to the academy to out of the academy? We had the field training officers, and all of a sudden they took away the pay that was extra for field training officers. Well, guess what? Now you don't have a lot of people that want to be field training officers. So now you have people that just want to pin, and they wanted something that they can put on their sergeant's resume to go make sergeant. So now you've lowered the standards there. So now you have a badass academy graduate who gets in an FTO's car who literally tells them, forget all that academy bullshit. So guess what? You've just chinked the armor for your culture. And they are so far removed in their air-conditioned offices that, well, and then it becomes well, I suffered, they should suffer. I had a crap FTO. What? That's not your job. You're not a leader. You're just a supervisor. And there's no leader and supervisor. And I cannot stand that aspect of it as well. We just went through a huge transition where a lot of the younger officers, because it's hot and humid here in Virginia, were asking for a change of uniform because they were still with the old nylon pleated, and they were like, can we get an outer vest carrier? You would have thought these kids asked for an $80,000 raise tomorrow with how these uppers were acting. I wore the uniform. Okay. And was it comfortable? Hell no. Then you're in a position to change it. And I'm bullshitting you not, James. The quote, and I almost lost it. I almost fought the dude in the firearms cleaning area. Well, where does it end? I was like, huh? Where does it end? They're going to ask for like new cars and new uniforms. Like, where does it end? Where does it stop? I said, it doesn't. It doesn't. If you can do for your people, you do for your people. Now, if they say, I would like a 2025 Escalade, then you have to tell them, hey, no, that's out of bounds. But a more comfortable uniform, a ball cap in the summertime to keep the sun out of their eyes, that's not professional. look around, man. These kids are raised on GTA and Battlefield and all those games. They want to look cool, and that's not a thing. I said that 100% is a thing. Let them look cool. Let them feel good. And guess what? The ones that don't feel good are going to want to look better in uniform. They're going to want the cool uniform. They're going to want the ball cap that looks good. And I said, you are just hindering the process because you had a bad process. That's not leadership. That stalls everything. And I told him, you're not going to stall it forever because a good and right idea can only be stalled. It'll never be stopped. And 6 months ago, outer vest carriers, I think they went with Lululemon pants and a new like kind of mesh shirt.
Is that like the
And
yoga
guess what?
pants? Because that would be distracting for the perp while you throw the cuffs on.
I know.
Johnson swinging around.
I think they're tack pants, and guess what? You had a bunch of happy officers, and it lends itself to now I want to do work. I want to get out of my car. You have nylon pants that are ready to like spark a fire every time you get out in 90-degree heat, and you're in your air conditioned office. You might not want to get out of that car.
Well, also, which is better in a foot pursuit? One is more athletic than the other. So even from a performance point of view, it makes sense.
And you see it. Everyone, like the one thing law enforcement hates is change or lack of change. Like, and that's like the truism. And they don't want to be wrong, which means that they just stall. And I call them kids, but I told all the supervisors that I talked to, the kids didn't do this. They didn't lower standards. They didn't get caught doing what they shouldn't have. You guys did. Like that's on you. I am sick and tired of blaming a younger generation or kids today. Well, who raised them?
Absolutely.
Who taught them? Who were their examples? Like, look in the mirror. I have 5 kids. I have had 2 ex-wives. I have my third wife, third time's a charm. But guess what? I had to have honest conversations with my children about my failings as a man because I cheated. And that is on me. And I was a coward, I was a liar, and I was not a good husband. For me to say anything other is to set myself up and my children for failure at a later date. So as young as they could understand my moral failings, they were told. Now, I didn't go into the nitty gritty, but they were told, guess what? My first wife, we're best friends. And my second wife, not so much. But all of my children are a unit. We're a family. They visit me. They call me. They look to me because I didn't bullshit. I didn't put myself on a pedestal that I could easily be knocked down. That's what I tried to bring to my law enforcement career. I made mistakes. Here they are. I always tried to correct. I make amends. And law enforcement for years was, we got it. Don't worry about it. And then what happened? The information age. And it turned out most of what we said, that we can get everybody in custody in 3 easy ninja moves, was bullshit. And what did we do? In response, we yelled at the public. We blamed society for changing. No, that's on us. You knew you were lowering standards. You knew your DT programs were crap. You knew a week of physical control in the academy and then nothing else is probably going to make some bad habits and make some scared officers do horrible things. And you have to look in the mirror, and law enforcement, especially during the defund area, arena, that was a horrendous, way too far to the left response to real problems in law enforcement. But where were the chiefs? Where were they standing up and saying, whoa, we have some things we need to fix, and here's some reasonable solutions? No, they stuck their head in the sand and they went with the defund movement to save their own skins.
It was beautiful though, watching some of those chiefs kneel. I've got posters of it on my bedroom wall. Chiefs just kneeling because then
Well,
that's everything. Everything's fixed now. You went down on one knee, so
yep,
we don't need any changes. You just I'll frame
nope,
that, and then I know my family's safer now. So thank you for your
yep,
service.
yep. And to have the empathy and compassion, we had a huge we actually had a riot in a surrounding city that we went to. That was fun. But in our city, my chief, he was a black man, and he came up in an era where he was in the 80s, and he told me all the horribleness that he went through on my department, where they would mess with his car and wouldn't back him up right away, and he became chief. He when all like the BLM stuff and the protests started happening, I had community members that were like, "Hey, we're going to do a vigil. Will you come? Will you protect it? We're not gonna do what happened in surrounding cities." The chief was. I went to the chief. I said, "Hey, I'm getting contacted," but he goes, "All right, I'll be there." And then he was there.
Mm-hmm.
And then one of the saddest kind of episodes in my police career was he saw the need for physical fitness and for a revamped DT program. So he allowed um, the DT program to go DT quarterly, which every 3 months it was an 8-hour block. You could get OT. We would bring Jiujitsu instructors. We would bring strikers, like everything. The same 15 officers. We were a 400 member complement. The same 15 officers every time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when all this stuff is going on, I kind of see my in, and now I want working out on duty. So I went to him, and he nailed me. I'm always passionate, and sometimes I go overboard. So I corner him in the hallway, and he was great. Like he knew who I was. He talked to me all the time, and I said, Chief, can you please look at setting aside some time for working out on duty if the supervisor allows it? Blah 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 blah. Then he looked right at me. He goes, "No." And I said, "Chief, like this is the time." He goes, "No." He goes, "It's going to be an expense. There's going to be people that get hurt." And he goes, "I just can't do it right now." I said, "Chief, you've got to." He goes, and he looked right at me. He goes, "Cool. I gave you DT quarterly." He goes, "You said everybody wanted that." And I was like, "Yes, sir." He goes, "How many people come?" And he had me. He absolutely had me. And he goes, "I have to deal with a bunch of stuff that I know you don't care about, but I have to go to city council and I have to talk about overtime." And he goes, "I'm going to keep your DT quarterly program because I know some officers go to it." He goes, "But there is no way that I can expand into a physical fitness program when I know only 15 people show up to your class when I've allotted 25 a pop. And you told me it was going to grow and we were going to need to add dates." And I hung my head. And he was absolutely right. I hated it, but he was correct.
Well, let me ask you this, because I talk a lot, as we were talking again before we hit record, about how there are some very actionable solutions to a lot of the issues that we have, especially in recruitment and retention, which obviously then feeds into physical and mental health in the first responder professions. But in the fire side, the work week is a huge, huge thing. And now I think we're up to 10 or 11 departments. One of the EMS
Yeah,
ones
that's
just switched.
amazing, by the way. You're
It
doing
is. I
good
mean,
work.
it's phenomenal. And every single one of them, I just shared a video today. They're like, our recruitment's gone through the roof. And, we've got classes full of veteran firefighters and paramedics. And so, we're seeing an actionable issue there now. Obviously, law enforcement is a little different. The work week is, somewhat where it should be. Both of those professions, I would argue, just as you alluded to earlier, are the most beautiful and incredible callings, which is why you and I, even though we're not wearing a uniform, are still, advocating for it. But it's the working environment, it's the working
Yep.
conditions that are broken. You're king for a day. What do we need to do on the law enforcement side to increase that level of recruitment so that you are able, once again, to pick that top 10, 15, 20% of the list and get those physically prepared, emotionally prepared young men and women that are going to be phenomenal police officers in the future?
Uh, Reinstitute the full physical complement, which we have an obstacle course, and then it's push-ups, the flexibility test. I would do a 300 meter sprint and then a shuttle run. So, and they don't necessarily have to score high on it, score like an academy would, because there is a physical test that they have to do 3 times to graduate from the academy, although that got fudged a little lately. So I would implement that, and I would keep in contact, whether it be by Zoom calls or phone calls, with the people that are going through the process, because they limited the recruiting and the background investigators so badly that there was no follow-up, especially with the military veterans, because we're a huge military community. But those guys that are getting ready to get out in 2 months, they can't wait around. They're going to go home. But if you tell them, hey, we can pre-hire you and you can come do ride-alongs, and then I would reinstitute the prep class for those people coming out while they're getting ready to class up. That was the biggest thing we saw to get these kids, I call them kids, but they are kids to me, jazzed about what they were about to do. Because, and everybody likes to tell their war stories, right? But when I was physical, and I learned from Jeff, because Jeff was like, you get people to assimilate, and then it's going to be the culture before they get into the culture. Those groups were so tight-knit of 20 to 25 individuals that were consistently coming to the prep classes, that the people that didn't come to the prep class, you were either going to assimilate into their academy class or they were going to bounce you, because they weren't going to carry the dead wood. They would help. They were empathetic. They were compassionate. Hey, this is what you need to do. This is what we've been doing, right? I had kids that would tell me, hey, we just went on a 4-mile run around the lake, because that's where they do the 1.5 miles. They're like, we all passed it. Like, here are our numbers. How do I get stronger? Right. Like, we had a full, I was able to build a gym. It took me a 2-year fight, but we have a full Sorinex gym at our academy. So that's where these guys learn. And then they learned in the prep class, you don't have to be like friendly, but you don't have to be an academy instructor. I want to know where you came from, because I know, and you know, most of the people that get in this profession come from a place of trauma.
Mm-hmm.
And what we want to weed out is the people that have not come to recognize their trauma and want to take it out on others, and those that have recognized their trauma and want to prevent anyone else from going through it. And in that prep class, that's what we were able to find. We were able to find the women that their fathers were abusive, or something had happened in their past and they wanted to help, and they didn't have upper body strength. So now my wife is a very strong female, so they were able to find an example. I found kids that didn't have a good father figure that clearly were looking up to me, and then I was able to tell them the funny stories of law enforcement while still getting the message across. I told them that not everyone is cut out for this profession, and you may make it. I told them that I have 3 hostage rescues under my belt. I rescued 9 people. My first one was a military member that there was a lieutenant there that actually was able to talk to him, and we were able to sneak in and get his son out. I said, but he had us. He had rifles staged on his bed, and he had us at the bay window, but he heard that man's voice, and we were lucky, and then we took him down. My second hostage rescue, when I went in to rescue the female, the entire entry team, to include a canine, didn't go in with me because they were scared. So I'm literally like trying to pass this girl off, and I'm like, I'm in here alone, right? And then the guy comes to the we thought he was armed with a weapon. The guy comes to the top of the steps, and he has basically a chain wallet. That's what he was faking. He had a knife against her, but he had left it. And I said, these are the things that it's not a normal profession. These are the things you can encounter. And then they're like, well, what did you do? I said, I told the guy I had my weapon drawn. And then I knew he was not armed. I could see his hands. I holstered my weapon and said, hey, come down to me. You can take me hostage. And he fell for it. And then I nailed him on the steps. And exactly that. So then they start laughing. And they're like, holy cow, this is the greatest job ever. When I went to the military, so you have to get affable officers who are not just going to tell the horrible stories and you don't want to talk about it and the shit you see. Like, I always talk to my family about what I saw. I didn't go into the nitty gritty, but I spoke, and I tell these kids, talk about it, talk about all of it. If you don't, it's going to come out in ways that you don't want it. So that would be the emotional intelligence piece that can start early. And then in the academy, you are not their friend. You that's where the professionalism comes in. You don't let up on that. And you make them physically hard, but when they hit their little goals, give it to them. Tell them that was hard, you made it. The best instructors I had in the military was when I knew I was faltering, but I knew I was giving my best, realized it in me, and would just lean down and whisper to me, you got it. And that was it. That's all I needed.
Mm-hmm.
They recognized me. They saw me. All right, let's finish this, right? So you have to get the right instructor cadre, and that's what always ticked me off. Is it was always the old boy network. Oh, you want off the street? Go to the academy. And they thought training was just yelling at people. No, there is a way to stress inoculate in which sometimes, yeah, it'll be the yelling, absolutely. Sometimes it's just going to be that quiet demeanor and having that physical presence that literally scares and you have to tell them, this is a suspect. If I was on the other side of the law and I knew by your countenance right now, I'm going to take you out. And you have to realize that. Because the job at its finest is, can you save a life? Can you take a life? Are you willing to risk your own to do one or both of those things? That's the highest end that this can get. And we just throw that away like we're fighting the evil you never see. Like, it's crap. Because you can go 20 years and never be involved in any of it if you don't want to. And then after that, if I was king for a day, every department should bare minimum 5 years, no matter who you are not coming out of uniform patrol. You're not coming out. Do your 5 years in uniform patrol. The way my department got ruined is favorites were picked, and all of a sudden at the 2-year mark, you're writing these, they call them PVAs, where the position vacancy announcements, and all of a sudden you see very specific things written into that announcement that the 10 people they're getting ready to pick. That is demoralizing. And it's playing favorites, and that's the antithesis of what we should be about, right? I'm not saying it's totally based on your numbers or your statistics or whatever. That is horrible as well. But when you're playing favorites because this person eats lunch with you, I will never understand how the uppers think we're that dumb, that we don't get what's going on, or that they're that insulated. They think, I don't give a shit if you know what I'm doing or not. Like, I'm here, you're not here. So I would absolutely institute, you're not going anywhere for 5 years, because at the 3-year mark in law enforcement, you know your way, and you know when you get stuck, who to ask for help. Like, all right, this is a complex case. Like, I need to call this detective. He's worked with me. At the 5-year mark, you're the one younger officers are calling, and you've pretty much, how to solve a lot of things. And that's when you should start sergeant, detective, any of those things. Because when you do it young, it compresses everything, because now let's say you get to the narcotics unit at 3 years. Now you've been in there 10 years because you're having fun. Now wow, like, I'm taking up a spot and I've been here a long time. So now you're going to do stuff to avoid getting kicked out of narcotics. That's no longer the job, right? And at 5 years, nobody's going to question your bona fides because you've been here for 5 years. And talking about the assimilation, it grounds you to that department. Now you've been there 5 years. Now you're vested. And when you see that this applies to everyone, it puts morale through the roof, because now you know there's a system in place. Because all these uppers talk about, well, we have a process and everything, but then all of a sudden when their buddy gets on the department, or we had a lot of, like, guys that came from the military with specialties. Now all of a sudden they're getting plucked for SWAT. They're getting plucked for detective spots. That's crap. Like, that's not fair. And you're demoralizing the vast majority of your department. So your buddy gets a swing or a female gets a spot. And now I feel bad for her because everybody thinks they know why she got the spot. And she doesn't deserve that either. That happens a lot as well. Um, we recently had a supervisor made, and they like went around and around to get a female captain on our department, and everybody knew the fix was in. And I love this girl. She was awesome. She's a good supervisor. She's a deserved captain. She got it early because they basically like made a spot, moved this person over here. Now, guess what you've just done? Everybody looks at her jaundiced and thinks, oh, this is the only reason you got it. And then someone like me that's like, nah, she deserved every bit of it. But even I was like, they shouldn't have done it this way. Mm-hmm. Because then you still have old men thinking, well, we did it. We're the savior. We made it. Where if they had just waited a year, she would have got it the way she's supposed to. And I would take away any kind of merit pay or any kind of bump in pay that doesn't affect the entire department. We used to have a merit pay system, and a major told me I was going to get it, and I refused it. And he flipped his wig. He was so upset. He was like, what are you doing? I said, I don't believe in it. And I know what you're doing. Get us a pay plan. And he was like, you deserve this. I said, no, I don't. I said, I'll take that $1,000 and divide it among the 400. Give everybody $1 raise. I don't give a crap. I'm not taking it. And he was incensed because what they were doing was they were trying to give certain individuals this merit pay so that they would go back and see, oh, I got it. You got to do this. Like, get rid of all of that stuff. It should be above board. There should be boards you go through. There should be more people in the mix, supervisory, that say, yes, we sign off on this. And it's just a fairer system. That's what I would do for King for a day. And I would institute pay plans and pay people what they're worth.
I love all of that. Going back to the second hostage rescue, did you then go and buy a T-shirt saying, actually, no one is coming to save me? I was in there on my own.
Well, so what this was there's a female. She was in the second story. This guy had been doing cocaine all day, and he kept coming out, and he was holding it. It wound up being a wallet, but they thought it was a gun because it was at night. I was actually coming from the jail with my buddy, and we hear it, and I was like, oh, this sounds cool. And I was just getting ready to come on the SWAT team, and they had done another hostage rescue. So I'm literally texting my buddies. I was like, you ain't got to come to this. I got this. So there was a sergeant that was just kind of lost in the sauce, like couldn't figure out what to do. So I set up an entry team. We had K9, and I wound up, the guy kept having to go into a bathroom and he would snort more cocaine. She was at the window. I got her to throw the keys to the apartment down to us. So I surreptitiously opened the door, and then I'm telling her, I was like, can you get to the landing? Because I opened the door, I could see there was a landing. And then I shut the door again. So I got the entry team stacked up. She's like, I think I can. I was like, next time he comes to the bathroom, like, go, run. Well, she was a larger gal, and he had broken her leg, and I didn't know that. She was in a cast. So he goes back, he comes, threatens her, says he's going to shoot her, all this stuff. We're like talking. He goes back in the bathroom to do another bump. And I said, go now, go. So she goes, I'm going. And then I hear her. I look to the entry team, and I was like, hey, we're going as soon as she gets to the landing. So I fling open the door, and then I see the cast, and I see she's a big lady, and she's like not even to the landing yet. And I'm like, oh God. So, and then I hear him, and he comes running down to the landing. She kind of stumbles. I come in. She gets to the bottom. He's froze on the landing because I have my weapon out. And then I grabbed her, and I was like, take her. And she's like, there's nobody there. And I'm like, what? And then I'm literally, and these are the stories that like, they're awesome. So I have to take my eyes off him. I'm still pointing, and I take my eyes off him, and I look around. I'm like, no shit, nobody can really, right? So I like grab her and I was like, get the hostage. So then they get her and he's on the landing now, frozen, and the wallet is swinging. So I was like, oh, you faking the fun. So then I did. I holstered the weapon and I told him, I said, come to me, man. Come to me. You can take me hostage. And he's like, for real, for real? I was like, yeah, man, take me hostage. We got her. And he goes, all right, you're going to shoot me. You're going to shoot me. And I was like, no, 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 no. Well, he comes down, right? The second he comes down the steps, he's probably like 3 steps from the bottom. Here comes the entry team with rifles, like all pointed right at him. And then he's like, you are going to shoot me. And he goes to turn. And then I just like speared him on the landing. And then the knife was in there. And so then I went over the radio. I was like, suspect in custody. And then I just couldn't help myself. I was like, 2 L's and cool. And I'm coming out. I'm getting high fived. And the sergeant comes up to me and goes, hey, they want to see you at the command center. And I'm like, what do they got, like cheerleaders or something? She goes, I don't think so. And what wound up happening was the entry team called that they had failed to make entry. I didn't have my radio on, James. I'm not saying that's the smartest thing. I didn't hear that. And when they say they failed to make entry, no one accounted for me making entry. So the command center had been set up. They were paging out SWAT, and they told them, do not enter the house, right? Like they didn't go anyway, but so they said, do not enter the house. And I'm taking care of business. So then the entry team says, we have to enter. Cool's already in there. We have to enter. So then they entered, guns all blazing. I go across to the command center, and it's the captain of the SWAT team that's there. And he's like, what in the I was like, hey. I was like, I'm on the west side. This was the east side thing. I don't even think my radio was working. That's on you guys. Our equipment sucks. And I was like, 2 L's and cool, write the award. Your guys didn't have to get up. I heard you had a late night like 2 nights ago. And thank God he starts laughing. And he's like, get out of here. Get out of here. The chief's coming. Get out of here. So I was like, okay. So yeah. So that was I guess I should have had a t-shirt made, but and what came out of that was a lot of the younger guys, the canine guy apologized to me, had the dog apologize to me. And one of the guys, because I had already made a name for myself and I was different, and don't get me wrong, like I had an ego on me because it was a natural offshoot of everyone was telling me you can't operate like this. Like, that's not how cops are. Like, you're not what we want, right? So I was having success, and I didn't understand how my success is the department's success. Like, why am I continually being brought into offices and being told I'm doing wrong, but hey, get back out there and do it again? It was so infuriating to me. So I turned off a lot of the younger officers, and that was to my detriment because I could have been helping a lot more people a lot sooner. But I was like, it's just me, and everybody can go F themselves. Like, I'm gonna do it, right? And part of my trauma was I was very self-sacrificial. So part of me going in like that was I'm already dead anyway. Like that's how my entire SWAT career, that's how I thought, because that's how, Musashi thought and all the warriors thought. Like, you're already dead. The battle has already happened. Whatever's going to happen's happened. So I internalized that, like, and it made me a better operator, but sometimes it made me a dick. So I was like, you guys aren't me, like, get away. One of the guys who became my very good friend, Mike Jones, he came up to me and he goes, I hated you right before that call. I hated you. And he goes, all I ever heard was these Marc Coull stories and cool stories. And he goes, I tell everybody now, like, you can believe all them cool stories are bullshit until you find yourself in the middle of a cool story. And I had a lot of that because the empathy and compassion led me like to strange places, strange calls in the middle of neighborhoods, in the middle of gangs. Like, it just, finding the good in the surrounding areas pointed me to cartels, human traffickers, the worst gang members. The third hostage rescue I did was I had become friends with a 9 Trey gang member who was abducted with 5 members of his family and holed up in a hotel. And he was texting me during it. And the other gang members that were literally selling his stuff on Facebook Live because they had orders from New York, they would never have believed he was talking to a detective. And I was able to get him out under a ruse that he was going to get him more money. And then we wound up taking these guys down. And those guys ate 30 years. And it was all because this one kid, he watched his best friend get executed in his driveway. I probably told this story in the first podcast, but he and the detectives that showed up thought he had to be in on it because he was stone-faced. He didn't belie any emotions. The rest of the gang had showed up. They were going to go get retribution. And the detectives were like, hey, we're looking at him for this. And I was like, he didn't do it. And they were like, he's a fucking gang member. You know he did it. I was like, he didn't do it. And I said, I got here first. His mother called me. And when I went up to his room, he cried on my shoulder for about 5 minutes. I held him. And then as soon as he was done with that, he looked at me and the shark came back in his eyes. And he's like, I got to go downstairs. I said, all right, I'll go with you. But as soon as the detective showed up, because in their minds, someone who saw that doesn't act like that. But that's your perspective. That's how you came up. This kid can't show emotion to other gang members. That's weak. That's soft. And then he loses his gang. And through that interaction with him, that's what led him to trust me enough when his life was at risk. Like, I still have the text messages. That's the one case when I left, when I retired, I took pieces of that case because that was me at my best. Because if I had treated that kid like most officers would have treated that kid, he would have died. And that would have been on me. And who knows, he could have been, involved in other things. But in that moment, he was a kid that was worth saving. And I've kept up with him. He went back to prison, but it was a burglary that nobody was in the house, so he was pretty proud of himself. But I keep up with his mom and stuff like that. And when I retired, talking about the transition, that's what messed me up the most. And I didn't think it was going to happen to me, but it did. So I had my tactical Instagram, and when I retired, they were all asking me because that Instagram came up because the people at prep class had a recruiter that was basically telling them that he offered life coaching services and all this stuff. And I was like, what? And they were like, do we have to follow you on Instagram? I was like, I don't even have an Instagram. Like, what is Instagram? What are you talking about? And they were like, well, we kind of like your philosophy on things. And it was just, this other guy tells us that he can do life coaching and he was going to charge him. And I'm like, what? I was like, no, I'll start an Instagram. You guys can talk to me through that. And then what wound up happening with tactical, because it's a play on words, obviously. The kids in the neighborhood started asking me, you have an Instagram, you have an IG? And I was like, yeah, it's tactical. So all of a sudden I started getting police recruits and gang members, and everybody would DM me, and it just kind of it grew from there. And when I retired, I called them my little army, and it was kids from gangs, kids that had been affected from gangs. I got college scholarships for some of these kids, so I followed them. Some of them became guidance counselors. Some of them became teachers. I have one doctor in the mix. So they were like, hey, you can't drop this. We have to be able to contact you. And they were like, can I have your personal number? I was like, absolutely not. And I said, I'll tell you what I'll do. I said, I'll retire the Instagram. I won't post anything because they wanted it to be theirs. So I said, everything I did with you guys, that's where it stops. All my phrases, all my stuff, that's where it stops. I will leave the DMs and the stories, and you guys can follow that, and you guys can talk to me whenever. So I retired in January, and in February, there was a really bad incident in my city where a mom killed her children, and I knew those kids. And while it was happening, the police, and this was just a tactical decision, they didn't go in right away because the offender, they felt, was still armed and was directly behind the door. What they discovered was the young son might still have been alive because they're pretty sure they heard screaming and they couldn't tell whether it was the woman or whether it was the kid. So police wise, you make those decisions and you have to live with them. What messed me up was I'm getting I don't know how many DMs because it was a neighborhood I worked, and they were telling me who the kids were, and they were telling me who the mom was because I had interactions with the mom. I'd actually helped her with we have the Buffalo family that does like homeless stuff and gives food, and they were I apologize, James. This is gonna take a bit. They were begging me to get out there, and they were telling me that they knew I would have already been in the house, and what's going on, and why is this happening, and they're taking too long. And I just kept talking to them, and then I started getting contacted by officers, and they're like, "We miss you. We needed you. This isn't going to be okay." And I'm the guy that, like, through the 25 years, I never had the any kind of mental health, like even with the divorces and all that stuff. The job was my safe place. Like, that's where I could be better. That's where I put all that empathy, compassion, and love. Like, that was my safe spot. Like, no matter what I was doing, I knew I was doing good. I knew I was trying to be correct. That's where I could be my best version. And I never thought I would be the guy that after it was gone, I would ever feel useless or worthless, and I felt the most useless as a human being I've ever felt in my life. And I knew rationally I was retired. I earned my retirement. But emotionally, nope. I it's because of that empathy, because of that compassion, and because of that love, and because the juxtaposition of I knew why the police were doing what they were doing, because it's risky. And I know why these people in the neighborhood are like, you need to get out here. They're doing this wrong. And while one was a huge compliment to me, the other was me realizing that how I approached it is not the only approach, right? Like, my 30 seconds of calculated crazy, it's not tactical. It isn't. It's nothing I would put on someone else. And this is where I get mad at some of the Monday morning quarterbacking from people that were like, just because it works doesn't mean that it's a good tactic. But it worked. And sometimes that's the play. 30 seconds of calculated crazy solves a lot of shit. But it's nothing that you can teach. Courage isn't a tactic, but it should be in us. So it crushed me. And then I wanted to get rid of my Instagram. And I wanted to stop talking to everybody. And my wife was like, you can't do that. And she's like, take time. And what wound up happening, James, was everything you hear about people that are in crisis. For the next, like, I have a lot of animals and I live out in the country. I have a gym totally outside. I stopped. And I would tell myself, you got to work out today. You got to do. And I was like, nope. And my daughter, who's like me, she just graduated Virginia Tech. I didn't want to talk to her. And that's when I knew. I was like, all right, we're faltering here. Like, something's goofed. And for about almost 2 months, I just got up and I would sit in a chair and I would doom scroll and then get off it. And then it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And luckily for me, because I listened to people who had been through it, I had been through courses, it wasn't unknown to me. I didn't consider myself weak. I went and I saw my doc and I said, hey, here's what's going on. And talk therapy doesn't really do much to me. But what I wound up getting, I got on some antidepressants, got some sleep meds, and then weaned myself off as it started getting better. And that's just my route. But people need to realize you have to realize. Like I knew, and it was because 30 years ago we didn't discuss that stuff. You just ate it, and maybe you swallow your service weapon, maybe you get drunk, maybe you don't. Because of all the advancements in these are the signs, these are what, and I did not consider myself weak. And the second part, I didn't consider myself a burden. I knew offloading this to my wife, talking to some friends, forcing myself to be vulnerable. I wasn't being a burden to anybody. It was the people that loved me. And I listened to all this as a police officer. I didn't ever make a gang member feel that he was a burden to me because, hey, I'm criminally minded, but here's what I want to tell you. All right, I'll listen. And I'm going to try to make corrections where I can. And I'm not always going to agree with you, but I need you to talk to me. So that was, and I never, like, the ego part of me was, that was a part of the 3 weeks of not wanting to realize it, because I was like, no way. 25 years, I didn't have this problem. Like, one of the last things that happened when I was at the command is my best friend got busted in fraud and got arrested. Like that, I was good. The guy I rolled with wound up, he's in prison right now because he was abusing his stepdaughter. That threw me for a loop, but I was able to, like, the job, I'm doing the job. Like, not being in the job and not being able to affect anything in that course of action crushed me. And it's not quite the same as the job is your identity, but it was part and parcel to that I was internalizing. I should have been there. I could have been there. Did you retire too early? Is this what happened? And I just never thought that would be me, but it was. And thankfully now, like, I'm on the mend, and then I started getting serious about my neck and fixing everything, and it kind of opened me up. And now I'm on a routine. I get my purpose, and I have my youngest son, and I feel, I always felt for officers that happens to, but now I have another arrow to help somebody else with if they have. And I have officers talk to me all the time about retirement and the transition and stuff like that, but I never thought that was going to occur, and it did. And the universe always every time you think you got it figured out, like, it'll show you. No, you don't. So I don't want to go through anything like that again. But yeah, it was an eye opener, and that was like 2 months into my retirement. But
I've said this on here, quite a few times. One of the most crushing things in uniform is the inability to save. Simply, and I've said this many times, I was a complete black cloud. So not only did I have a lot of horrible shit, but I never had a cardiac arrest safe in 14 years. Not one, and most people have at least one or two to hang their hat on. And then, even with that purpose, what we're able to do while we're on an ambulance, in a fire engine, working in a squad car, you have the tools, you have the team to really facilitate these issues. And I had an experience working a cardiac arrest on a plane about a year and a half ago on the tarmac of Heathrow Airport. I didn't have any of that. And that was, again, like, crushing, because I know if we'd had that team, the outcome might have been the same, but that person would have had the full gamut of what you need to do to respond to a cardiac arrest. And instead, we had this kind of dripping of some of the right equipment, some of the wrong equipment, working them in the middle of a aisle of a plane, with only one person that worked in emergency medicine on the whole plane. So it's that purpose, I think, is it's hard to transition to, like, how can I still have that purpose but be in this new phase? I'm not wearing the uniform now. What does that look like now? But I think that transition also bolsters that empathy, like you're talking about. Every time you've worked through one of these challenges and you come out the other side, you're able to be more empathetic. So you had that empathy, that compassion when you were working in the uniform. But now, this next crucible that you had to work through, when you hear that people are struggling with their transition, you're like, well, I've been there too now. I can
Yeah.
empathize. So it does become a beautiful strength. But the key is obviously, as you said, recognizing it early enough, and then understanding that the toolbox to work with this is so huge. And it could just be, some antidepressants and sleeping pills for a bit. It could be an ibogaine journey. It could be equine therapy.
Yep.
It could be a number of those things. But that, that hope of working through and that post-traumatic growth, I think that is so important in a transition story, because you're still that same kind, compassionate human being. You're still that warrior in the garden, but your garden has changed.
Yep. Yeah. And that was like, even getting the because medicine is taking a hit. I had never had a primary care doc. I just didn't. So getting on an age, I got a primary care, and then when I spoke with her, I said, "Listen, I need to feel this out, and if you're not the one, you're not the one." She was awesome. She literally told me, what we're going to do is we're going to get, low dose and this. And she goes, I work with a lot of you just because the area, like we're in Virginia Beach, so there's military, law enforcement, everything. And she said, um, and she asked, diet, well, how's your sleep? And she goes, are you working out? And I said, I've stopped working out. She goes, all right, what we're going to do is, and then she asked me about talk therapy. And I said, I was mandated to go through it because of some of the incidents. I said, it didn't really do anything for me. I don't know whether it was the vibe or whatever. So she goes, I want to go low dose. And she goes, you have to promise me you're honest with me. And she goes, and I want you to start working out. What do you enjoy? And I told her, I was like, I enjoy training. She goes, have you trained? I said, no. She goes, as much as you can, force yourself back into that routine. And that was the game changer, was going on the low dose, figuring out. And then it just built on itself. And she was awesome. And she was like, all right, now we're ready to pull you off this. And we're going to try that. And that was absolutely game changing. So, and that was just my journey. And I've had other officers, they continually ask about, how's retirement? Are you ready for retirement? And that's the saddest thing. I'm sure you find it in the fire service. I don't know why these guys think it's going to last forever, but that is the biggest conversation I've had, because I retired young. I retired at 50 on the dot. And I had already socked away enough money in my ICMA account that's my passive income. And then I have my pension, obviously. And that was the goal. And I talk to guys that are already 30 years in, there's nothing. And you know it as well as I do. We have guys that retire and 5 years later, they're gone. And it's money troubles, it's alcohol troubles. We've had several suicides. And I tell people, if you're not prepared for that, for like having enough money or having a secondary job, or what do you want to do? And a lot of guys I talk to, they're like, I don't know. I was like, well, you better figure it out, because I knew I wanted my garden. I knew that was it. I didn't want to work anymore unless I wanted to. I talked to Jeff, and Jeff's in Alabama now. Maybe I go down there and help out, but I wanted to retire. The thing that got me was, and I'll never fully do it because I promised the kids that I came up with, I didn't divest myself. So when that incident happened, that broke me, because I felt useless. And you always say, oh, well, the jobs shouldn't be your identity and your purpose, but it's in me. And I didn't recognize how much it was in me until people needed me, and I didn't have the ability to flick my lights on and go 100 miles an hour and get to them. So that is part of, that's in me. So that's what threw me. But a lot of the guys I talk to, they're absolutely scared of retirement because they haven't prepared themselves properly, whether it be emotionally, financially, to take that step. And then what makes it sad about that is now you're just eating up a spot. Like you're past 50 in this job. You're not what you used to be, and you're stopping somebody else from growing in the profession. that bugs me. Like you should be ready to step out, because I knew when it was my time. I'm in the gang unit. That's a huge spot. That's an awesome spot to have. As soon as I could, I'm going to step away. And I was lucky where I had the people that were going to take my spot there. It didn't pan out the way I wanted it, but I did everything I could to teach them my way. And this is how you get the intel. This is how you get into the community. And I was able to know that. I mean, the uppers wind up killing it, but my spot was secure with someone that I knew. And I think that makes a huge difference, because you've hit on it so many times, and I love what you're doing, and I love seeing it grow, and the books and everything that you're growing. There is no higher calling or no higher compliment than to be called teacher. And when you get to that point in your career, if you're not that, you're not doing it right. Whether by your example or by you actually pulling somebody aside and saying, hey, this is how we can do this better. That's how it's supposed to be. And then when you step into your garden, there's no regrets there. There's no pulling you back. You know, my incident was members of the community that still wanted me in the community, but I have no regrets about how I exited, how I transitioned, because I did it to the best of my ability. And when you give your all, when you have that empathy, compassion, and love as much as you can have it, because, you know, I'm not saying I'm perfect. There were days where I wanted to punch the average citizen in the mouth just like everybody else, but I didn't. When you give it your all, there's no looking back. You know, I am supremely fortunate to have had the longevity in my career that I did, to have all the experiences I did, even while hurt. So I gave it my all. I was ready. I feel bad for the people that probably are ready, but just don't think they are, and they can't give it up. So that's, you know, king for a day. I would also tell people, start putting the retirement account to use. Let the city help you out and get an end date, because you can't be here forever. Nobody can.
Absolutely. Well, obviously, the theme of this whole conversation has been having the strength to be compassionate, empathetic, to forge community, to be your mentor. Yet when I look at a lot of the discussions that have happened the last few years, and people think it's so funny. Like if I was talking about vaccine mandates, oh, I'm a right wing whatever, and then I'm talking about Gaza, oh, you're a left wing whatever, and I'm like, dude, in the middle are the normal fucking people, you know, that
True that.
sometimes lean slightly this way or this way, but it's about kindness, compassion, empathy, community. But I see so much nastiness. I see an inability to critically think and say something as neutral as, for example, in Gaza, the innocent people that were killed on October 7th is horrendous. The innocent people that are being killed since is also horrendous. You know, that there are some immigrants in this country that have broken the law that absolutely need to be deported. But then this snatching of children and parents, you know, with basically no criminal record is horrendous. So I see this, like, if you don't pick a side, if you're not in one of the World War I trenches, then you're the most demonized, censored group, the common sense, neutral, kind, compassionate, you know, community-minded people. And that is like the heresy. It has been, you know, during COVID, talking about underlying conditions. Maybe we should address the obesity epidemic while we're going through this. So, you know, I know that you and I have got very similar kind of perspectives on some of these areas on a macro level now, nationally and even internationally, because it nauseates me to see British police arresting peaceful elderly protesters, you know, that are against the genocide of children, for example. What is your perspective on that loss of community, empathy, compassion, even though I would argue it's still the minority that we're seeing? And how do we bring that back into our own nations again?
The macro level, I mean, it still speaks to the micro of it, of how everything operates, because your sphere of influence is going to be your family and then your community and how you operate within them. But what I see on the macro is we as a society, the extremes used to just kind of be laughed off and all right, it doesn't matter. And then the information age and social media, and then it became amplified, and then it became monetized. And people will say, well, your side's making money off this, and not look in the mirror. And then it becomes the both sides argument. And they're like, well, no, my side got hit. This and empathy and compassion and love, like they don't have sides. It's can I objectively look at what's going on and come to an objective conclusion? The Gaza thing, yes, October 7th happened. It was horrible. Yep, absolutely. Israel went to war. Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to retribution, whatever you want to say. However, now you're just blowing up buildings and you can't even account for the people that are in the rubble right now. And your official count is at 67,000, but the unofficial count when they get into this rubble might be 250, 300,000. And when you say that seems extreme, then you're shouted down and you're called an anti-Semite or whatever it is. But then the flip side of it now is there is an entire side that is saying Israel controls the world. Israel tells the United States what to do, and you fund them. And when I get in those arguments and I say, yeah, but you know who's benefiting from hitting Hamas and Hezbollah? Who? The Saudis. Huh? Yeah, Sunni Shia. I was like, they want Iran taken out. Those are their proxies. Israel's doing their bidding because they're not really coming out and saying anything against it either. But they're lowering the oil prices for the United States, and the United States keeps sending bombs over. And then people are like, what? Huh? Because they want binary. They want the yes or no. They want the black or white. They don't want nuance. And we talked about it earlier. There was an opportunity for the UN to have a safe zone, but it would have required United States troops with UN support. And then we ixnayed it because we don't want skin in that game. But either side wants to yell at each other. But it's been getting progressively worse because we've been. It's the strangest thing, James, because as connected as we can be with the internet, we've become more disconnected with everything. It's the craziest phenomenon ever. You talked about COVID. I kind of vacillated between I'm all about the vaccine. I don't think it was a microchip in our head or anything like that. And when I started seeing all these crazy notions and the VA, the VAERS information, you know who I was able to get in contact with over the internet? Scientists. A lot of scientists. I still talk to scientists. There's unbiased PhD, Nini in the brain, gnarly by nature. I talk to them and I listen to them because they're experts. And all of a sudden we do our own research, and that blows my mind. No, you don't do your own research. Research takes a really long time. You got to be really smart to do it. We don't do our own research. We gather resources, we gather information, and then we should critically think and come to the best conclusion that we can. With the Gaza stuff, how is it controversial to say you should stop blowing up innocent civilians? And then all of a sudden you're flip crazy and you're anti-Semite. But then, like I was saying, there's an entire faction now that is anti-Semitic that is saying they're controlling and, they control finances and all. I was like, we are literally falling for the same tropes that were used to start a world war. And the other being blamed, like it amazes me that it's the same playbook. Find another, direct everyone's anger towards the other, and just double down on it. Whether it be immigrants or Jews or Muslims, we keep doing the same thing. And then the centrists in us that are like, well, hey, now I know a Muslim. Now I know a Jew. Like that's not how they think. That's not what's going on. So now there's this huge conflict, and people are just, I've never seen a citizenry so proud of their ignorance. so proud of their bullying power. And we elected someone who, whether he means to or not, it is almost like he's given tacit permission for us to be our worst selves, because that's the example he puts out there. To take revenge, to destroy your enemies, to go after all that type of stuff. And it's wrong. It's not what we would teach our children. We should teach our children to look at what's happening in Gaza and be absolutely appalled that war is an absolute failure. That's all it is. It's human failure at its worst. And I don't understand how it's so polarizing, and it shouldn't be. Like, you're not the Ukraine thing, that we turned on Ukraine, and then all of a sudden here we are 9 months in, and then, hey, maybe Putin isn't like on the level with us, and maybe he is like a despot. And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? I have arguments with my friends that are still in the military or that exited the military that go back to Iraq and Afghanistan. They're like, you think that was a good war? I was like, no. Well, we went. I was like, there were voices in opposition for both of those wars. Just because you didn't want to listen to them doesn't mean they didn't exist. And now all of a sudden, because you got lied to for 20 years, now everything that never happened. Nobody was ever in opposition to this. The government is evil. The government is the government. And the government does nefarious things to protect us, to further our agenda, and to get you cheap things at Walmart. And all of a sudden now you want to destroy the government, but you have no replacement. You're just yelling. You don't want them to do this. You don't want them to do that, but you'll still vote in the same person. And it's just disconcerting to me. You talked about critical thinking. I think there's a complete lack of it. And again, it goes to, we blame kids today and this and that. Well, who are their examples? Who raised them? And who are they looking to right now? We have absolutely, since Obama was elected, our politics have just gotten more divisive, more corrosive, and this is what these kids grew up with, while simultaneously being told America did a really good thing because we voted in a black man, so all that stuff that's over now. But then they listen to everyone rip that black man to shreds every chance they got for wearing a tan suit, for not doing things correctly. And then we just way on down the line, now the natural recourse to that, we elected a bully who is in the same stead as any other authoritarian figure, where I'm the only one that can solve this. And these are our friends. Israel is our friend. You can't say anything against them. And if you do, we're gonna censor you. But I believe in free speech as long as it's on my terms. And I'm attacking intellectuals. And you're smart. People that were going to college or not. And it's just, it blows my mind. And I go back to the micro version of it is, I told you, the only thing I can do is teach my sons. And I don't really have to teach my daughter now, because my hope for the future is talking to my daughter and her friends, because they literally look at us, James, like we are absolute dinosaur idiots. My daughter's friends, she has a political science degree in international law. She's going to take her LSATs, she's probably going to save the world. Her friends are bioengineers. One of her friends is an architect who literally goes to New York at 23 years of age and designs furniture, right? They are amazing. They don't get us. They don't understand why it is not okay to say what is happening in Gaza is not okay. It blows their mind. Mm-hmm. It blows their mind.
What I've said, many, many times is, if you just pull the focus back, like, again, that middle ground. For example, when I was saying during COVID this is obviously a real disease, and I had, physicians and all kinds of people that were witnessing, firefighters that were in these hot zones where, yes, lots of people were dying. And the vaccine, if nothing else, was seeming to be a symptom reducer. It was saving some people. But simultaneously, equally also a truth is that we are a very sick nation, and the underlying ill health of the American people was really why we lost so many people. So those two exist side by side. Yep. Now you expand that out politically. Firstly, out of 340 million people, you are telling me that Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the fucking pinnacle of leadership. Like, if you can look in the fucking mirror and say that to yourself, then A, that illustrates the mental health crisis that we have in this country, and B, you're a fucking idiot. Because like I said, the problem is we have a broken system, and I've said this many times. If you have to be basically a millionaire or billionaire and be devoid of ethics, meaning you will take lobbyists' money to get in that position. So that eliminates the real leaders of the world. So what we get, whether it's left and right, Fox News or CNN, Trump or Biden, it's like expecting a cupcake in a turd factory. The same fucking machine is churning out these pieces of shit. One's wearing a blue tie, one's wearing a red tie, but they are the same kind of horrible human being. To pick on the Biden administration, the way they handled that COVID pandemic, the fascism that came out of that, everything that Americans were told to do is the polar opposite of what they should have been told to do. Stay inside, order fast food, order alcohol, binge watch The Tiger King, and don't see your family and friends. Like, it's disgusting. They cause more fucking lives. And at the end of it, do we want to revisit it and learn from it? No. We don't want to talk about it anymore. So Instagram's going to censor you if you say vaccine or COVID or, mask. And so this is the thing. Like, people have to look over the last few decades. The obesity crisis has got worse. Our prisons have got fuller and fuller and fuller. The mental health, the opioid crisis, the gang membership, all these things have got worse and worse. And that is left, right, left, right, left, right. So there's only one truth, that the way that we choose these people is fucking broken. And the same kind of sociopath that seems to succeed in that arena rises up every single time. And look at the fucking idiocracy that we have at the moment. The clowns that are doing their social media WWF presentations to the military or whoever it is. Yep. Like, I know, the post that I made recently that angered some of the people I had on the show, who I just don't understand how, you can be that kind of person that had this service, in their heart. And some of them have even had near-death experiences, and then just be all in on one of these particular people. But I've kind of lost my train of thought now. I went off on a tangent then. But the point being, if we've deviated from the health of the nation, the mental health of the nation, the safety of the nation, because 70% obese or overweight equals a very, very unsafe country, because now we only have, it's like, I think it's just above single figures that are even eligible for military, police, fire, EMS, from what I understand, because of the health of the... So this is the point, is that the only people losing are the people. And one of my guests said a long time ago now, and it was such a beautiful kind of illustration. They said, imagine you're in a medieval village and you've got two groups of peasants arguing with each other. He said, where are they not looking? The castle. That's it. Mic drop moment. They do not work for the country. We've got it so turned around. These people we employ with our taxpayers' money to run certain areas, to be diplomats between different countries, to avoid wars, to encourage trade. And instead now we've, as you said, both sides, the last decade plus, it has been a dictatorship. I'm in charge. This is what you're going to do. And until we have an awakening that you want to change the world, start at home. That means work on your own shit. As if you will die on your sword for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, trust me, you've got some fucking work to do in the mental health space. Then you fucking work on your family, and then you step outside your front door like we've been talking about, and you become a mentor in your community. Whether you're going to teach, young kids how to change a tire, or you're going to start a fire academy, prep program, or whatever it is, if we all did that, you truly would make this country great again. But all these
Yeah, and that's
phrases, these T-shirts, like you said, from these politicians
yep,
are empty because we are getting fatter, sicker, and more divided, and that spans both sides of the aisle.
yep. And we like the COVID thing, we conflated government like ineptitude and inefficiencies, and then we linked it with the science and the medical practitioners who were literally dealing with a pandemic that was brand new and they were trying to figure stuff out. All the politicians wanted was the sound bites. Biden telling people that you were going to kill everybody if you went to Christmas dinner. Like you could watch the CDC director go, "What?" And just the same as when Trump was talking about maybe they can go in and do a cleaning and they're like putting their, but we conflated the two. And now we don't believe any of the institutions, even the poor scientists that were like, hey, and this is what drives me crazy about critical thinking. During the COVID pandemic, they were getting information fast and furious. And some people were not like getting the vaccine and not getting like not doing masks and N95 and all that stuff. They had to deal with all that data. So guess what? Science is going to change. Politicians are uncomfortable with that. The American public cannot deal with that because they're like, well, you just, and we have to get better at not conflating a politician's stance being left or right with actual science, actual experts, because now nobody believes anybody. And there are people in the government that do try their best, but they are the quietest voices because they don't have the millions and millions of dollars. Citizens United was the worst Supreme Court decision ever because it allowed dark money and super PACs to fund all these elections. And look at what happened even with something as non-controversial and bipartisan as AOC and Hawley coming out and saying no more individual stock trades. You have to have a regular portfolio that is directed by somebody else and you have no say in it, or you don't do it at all. And it is absolutely stalled. That tells you that there are middle of the road, no matter what you think of Hawley or AOC, they are trying to present what America wants and they're being stymied.
I think
And
America also wants to see the Epstein list from both sides.
absolutely.
But that
Absolutely.
was
And look
the
at that.
ultimate pendulum of it. Yeah, that was like a magic trick. It was
Yep.
amazing. Like, what's in my hand? Oh, nothing's in my hand. Now I'm in power. But wait a second. Time out.
Yeah. And the mere fact that like it kills me, right? Because I voted for Trump twice because I wanted the grenade thrown because I wanted Congress to start doing their job. And I grew up with him. My dad was a UPS driver. He knew all about him in the 80s and like Sammy the Bull, all those guys. So when he ran, I knew what he was. I knew he was bombastic. I knew his ego. I knew he was petulant. But I also knew I generally think in his own little way, he cares about America. He thinks he's right. But Congress has totally abdicated the responsibility of checks and balances. They don't pass legislation. They don't put clean bills up. They do backdoor deals. And I thought they're going to have to come in and give him guardrails. Right. And he was like, I wanted the border secure. I got people that are putting themselves at risk. It was horrendous what was going on. So I voted for, and I wouldn't vote for Hillary if I had a gun to my head. So I voted for him. And then I didn't want Biden because Biden, I knew like Biden's been in politics longer than I've been alive. That's ridiculous. So I voted for him again. And then Biden won. And I believe Biden won. And then because Trump is never going to admit failure. But then when January 6th happened, he lost me. Like, I don't care.
Whoa.
I don't care. Like,
yeah, that didn't happen though. Neither did the insurrection.
oh,
That was
yeah,
all just fake news,
yeah.
wasn't it?
It was all the FBI. They did it all. Well, but here to that point, I read Jack Smith's report when it was out there. It's no longer available, but I read it. It wasn't so much about the rioters. When you read about the fake electors and what he was trying to push, the DOJ was ready to include Barr, who eventually resigned. They were all going to resign because he was counting on fake electors saying that there was like all this stuff. When you read Jack Smith's report and they were going to seize the voting machines, there was a Joint Chiefs who was unnamed but would testify if necessary that when he found out what was going on, walked into the Oval and told him, if you do this, my men will hang you in the street, and then turned heel and left. And then all of a sudden the conversation changed, and then they put it on Pence, and they were hoping Pence would say, oh yeah, this is all fake. And I do not believe in Pence's politics, but Pence is an American hero because he stood up for the Constitution that day. That's my take on it. And Mike Pence, when he ran for president, I would rather have him all day long than any of the other challengers, because I know his religious views, but he was not going to impart them on America. He was going to try and convince America that, you know, his stance on abortion and his stance on reproductive rights was correct, not to force it down. So I have mad respect for him. And then obviously he gets back in, and the Epstein stuff starts happening. He ran on that. And then all of a sudden he's just like, what? Epstein files. Like, and you still have people that they'll just turn a blind eye to that. And I didn't give a crap about the Epstein files. I've worked human trafficking cases, and I was telling people, I don't think there's necessarily a list. I think the victims know who they were farmed out to, and I think it was just crimes of opportunity. Epstein wanted to get in with big people because he was trying to make his billions. He was doing real estate deals, all this stuff. And I said, that's how human trafficking works, because human trafficking used to be called prostitution, and that's what this was. It was a giant prostitution ring. And I told people, his name's all over that list. No. I was like, you're out of your gourd. And then I literally had to send people, when the pictures of him, I was like, here's another picture, here's another picture. And they were dumbfounded. I'm like, you guys don't even look into any of this stuff?
Just look at the footage of when he visited the UK. They had that picture plastered on castles and football pitches.
Yeah.
It was beautiful.
And I'm like, how do you suspend disbelief so much that you are willing to just give the benefit of the doubt? I don't, maybe he didn't do anything criminal. None of us can say, but he definitely was around the man. Like, that was his buddy. And now he's not releasing any of it. And we're just, it's like we play pretend. And it in the micro version, I watched that in law enforcement, where we knew that these neighborhoods were in distress and that there was a better way to go about policing, but we just pretended, no, we don't have the resources, we don't have this. And it just permeates. And then that becomes the status quo. And that's where we're at right now, where the status quo is whoever's got the money is going to be the candidate. And we can stop it. Like, I get so frustrated. The whole thing, the whole point of America was we're self-correcting. The founders, I have to believe they knew their flaws, because that's the government they made. A government of amendments, a government that had checks and balances. They knew human flaws. And now all of a sudden we want to wrest the power in one individual, whether it be Democrat or Republican. That's not what this is supposed to be about. And it's supposed to be about an educated citizenry. You can say whatever you want about the Second Amendment. They don't fear our guns. They fear our votes. And it burns me up when people like, your voting doesn't matter. If voting doesn't matter, why is that the thing they constantly go after? They gerrymander their districts. They try to restrict it, or they try to open it. If it didn't work, they wouldn't take the time to mess with it so much. There is so much power rested in the American public that we just set aside because we're convinced our guy is the savior. And it just drives me crazy, because the entire experiment rests upon the fact that we were to educate ourselves and want better for next generations. And I think for the first time in our history, we're not leaving it better than we found it. And it's sad. And especially with the 250th anniversary coming up, we're going to have Idiocracy in charge, who's printing their own coin or whatever they're going to do. And we should take that as a sign that we made it 250 years. So government is not only necessary, it can do good. It has done good as long as we watch it like a hawk. Like, and that's what we're supposed to do. We're not just supposed to take their word for it, but when they're on the right track or when the experts all come to a consensus, we need to back them up. And then we need to, like, our voice is our vote. And I just, I don't know. I mean, I do know how we got to this point, but it's so eminently fixable. And we just, like you said, the middle, unfortunately, what's going to happen is the centrist in the middle, and we're not necessarily prone to it. We're going to have to start shouting down the left and the right and tell them to sit down, shut up. The adults are in the room now. That's the only thing that's going to make a huge difference. And I think we have a shot at it because the people that voted for Biden, some of them have come around to the fact that we probably shouldn't have put a zombie in office. And the people that voted for Trump are coming, especially the farmers. They're like, hold up a second. Like, you're going to bail me out with tariff money that I'm already paying because of what you did starting a trade war. And you just gave $20 billion to a guy who just undercut our soybean sales. So I think we got a shot. We always have a shot. And America, like Winston Churchill said it best, America will always do the right thing after exhausting all of their options. And I think we're there, James.
Well, you said about Hillary, I agree 100%. And this is the point. Sadly, that was the election that I was first able to vote in. Actually, I think I just missed that. So it was the Bible. Anyway, I did independent because I'm like, I see what everyone is saying. This is the lesser of two evils. Now, let's do the math again. 340 million people. And the two you have to choose from are the lesser of two evils. That shows you that it's a completely broken system. But I am quietly optimistic. I'm loudly optimistic. What am I talking about? I just get angry about it. But I believe there is an awakening. And I think this is why there's this doubling down on all the things that are distractions. I mean, even, I don't want to take a deep dive into this, but the whole Charlie Kirk assassination, how convenient. Now, was it actually someone who was very anti-right and that was it? Or was it something that ended up being more of a JFK-esque conspiracy to keep focus on this one side? Every time, a good analogy, there was a shitbag here in Gainesville, a preacher that was burning the Quran a few years ago. And when it happened, as soon as I saw this story, I'm like, I bet you that motherfucker has just written a book. This is just about book sales, money. That's it. Sure as shit, there's, What It's Like Being a Giant Prick or whatever his book was called had just come out. And that was it. He was just pulling that kind of, in that case, Islamophobic, thread so he could get all these extremist Christians to buy his shitty book. And this is the point is, every time that the community, the compassion, the empathy starts to grow in the middle, we have this extremist event, the insurrection, whatever it is. And it is a distraction. It absolutely is. And this is the left and the right. They play the same fucking game. CNN and Fox are the same fucking blueprint. Open your eyes. It's to sell advertising space. That's it. So to me, we have to resist these kind of outlier extremist events and not be distracted from the biggest truth. We have to make America healthy again. I think someone mentioned that about a year ago, and fuck all has happened on that side. So we have to make America healthy again. We have to address the mental health crisis. We have to address, our schools so that we can raise kind, compassionate, fit, healthy children that know what real food looks like. These are all within our powers in our community. But the moment that these extreme events happen, just like you said, it's because they're scared. Because when we come together again, I think there's a document somewhere that says "We the People." I forget what it's called. When we come together again,
a lot of people have that tattooed on them, but don't really read the rest of it.
No, or don't tread on me. I think you're being treaded on. You're being stomped on right now. So, but I mean, sarcasm aside, the answer is community, compassion, and empathy and kindness, just like we've been talking about this whole 2 hours. And I think that the more we can lean into what we know is true, the more that we can lean into what Jesus actually would have done, and Buddha, and all these other prophets that preach kindness and compassion and community, when we refocus on what they have been telling us, all this ancient wisdom for millennia, we're going to take this back. But if we allow ourselves to be stuck in the World War I trenches of extremism, we might lose our country. So the choice is ours.
Yeah. And what it allows, like that's kind of been the theme, but when you live with empathy, compassion, and love, what it allows in is that loud optimism. Like, you realize you're not your first thought. You realize that what your biases are, and you put yourself in check before anybody else has to. And you said it with is this kind? It solves a lot of internal issues with us when we try to live that way. And it's what we want. When we're down in the dumps and we can't, and because I tell my sons this all the time, like, when the world makes no sense to you, when you're angry because your brain is not helping you out, that's when you need community the most. That's when you need to talk to your dad. That's when you need to talk to your mom. But everything about you is going to tell you not to, but you need to. But when you have somebody telling you the world doesn't make sense and it's because of this person or that person, then you don't have to look inward. You don't have to make that change. You don't have to be better because there's something else to blame. And then your identity becomes wrapped up in left, right, instead of best and good. Yeah. And that the best thing I talked about being a teacher, and that's the best thing I ever was able to do to officers. Like, you're going to have those moments where your bias is going to come out and you have to put yourself in check. And that comes from you're scared. And once you do it and you practice it, then you get back to my fear is constructive. It's telling me I'm in a dangerous profession, but I don't run around scared. And then you're not scared of the other, and you're not scared of anything that's going to make you do something that you can't take back. And that's where we're at. Like, that's the tinderbox we're sitting on to the macro. Eventually there's going to be something that a group can't take back, and either side is looking for it. And like, one of the most hopeful things I've heard is a lot of the protesters are worried that somebody's going to come in and agitate, and what they're teaching their protesters to do, if that person starts going, throwing, whatever, everybody sit down and let the focus be on that individual that doesn't represent us. And I was like, that's brilliant.
I love it.
That's wonderful. So even that is an awakening, because some of these protesters would have never thought about that. I mean, obviously we went through it, in 2020, where, entire neighborhoods are being burned to the ground. And now they're like, hey, if someone takes it to that level, sit and let them be dealt with. So even that I have hope for. But love wins, man. It is just a longer, harder slog, and hate is way quicker. But it does no good.
No, not at all. Just as a closing, I saw a beautiful video of police officers, Italian police officers in Milan. And rather than, they had all the riot gear and everything, and they just walked with the protesters. It was a peaceful protest, and they just walked with them. They're like, we're not here to beat on our own people. And I think that, a lot of people in uniform around the country, don't get me wrong, obviously if there's a threat, there's a threat. But if it is a genuine, peaceful protest against something that is just wrong, and this is what it really boils down to, a lot of these moral compass issues, is it right or is it wrong? How about that? You don't have to kneel and put your fists in the air, but you also don't have to act like these people are, the devil, when they're actually trying to just simply protest something that is completely wrong.
Yep.
So with that being said, we've been chatting for over 2 hours now. I want to be mindful of your time. For people listening, if they want to reach out to you, learn more about you, anything like that, where are the best places to do that now?
It's the tactical TACTICOULL on Instagram. And I get DMs all the time. So if they want to, I'm open to it. I'm retired now, James, so I got nothing but time, and I got a 3-month-old that just kind of hangs out with me. So yeah, and that Instagram, like I said, the coolest thing about retiring, they give you all these plaques and everything like that. The little army came and met me off site, and they gave me. I actually gave it to my son. They gave me a poster board with some of my phrases from that Instagram. And then they said to Detective Cool, a true warrior in the best sense, we love you. And it was pictures of them. I don't know if you remember, my gang unit shirt was like 2 unicorns kissing with a rainbow.
I do.
So I used to hand those shirts out. So all this poster is just all these kids from the neighborhood in the gang unit shirt, high-fiving, playing basketball. They took pictures with me, and that's the only thing I needed in retirement. Like that meant the world to me. So yeah, so that Instagram is still up, all my little phrases and stuff like that. And if anybody wants to DM me and tell me that I'm a horrible person or I never should have been a cop, I get that all the time. So yeah, so I'll argue all day. Or yeah, so. And then we have the links to Adopt a Cop and Massive and Jeff and all that good stuff. So a lot of officers reach out. Adopt a Cop is always looking for funding, and that will literally provide funding for police officers to get to Blue Belt. I went through the program. I put a bunch of officers through the program. And that goes back to your physicality will give you the confidence to roll with empathy, compassion, and love in every law enforcement endeavor. And it makes all the difference in the world.
Well, I want to thank you. We've had, as I said, over a 2-hour conversation again. It's been so great to be able to pull you out the shadows now and talk about your transition and the highs and the lows, and some of the not even political, because I hate that word, because it's not the conversation on how we can better America and Americans. So it's been incredible. So I want to thank you so much for being so generous with your time again and coming on the Behind the Shield podcast.
Thanks for having me, James.